Hello, everyone. I'm Sylvia,
I'm Jenny.
and welcome to Wombs with a View, Maternal Musings with Jenny and Sylvia. I hear a feedback, but it is what it is. We're live. Um, Jenny and I come together every week to talk about different subjects around maternity, all in the hopes about with providing you options and perhaps learning new things, educate you. With all the years behind us, we've learned a thing or two. And today is all about your vajayjay. So if you like this topic as much as I do, please give it a like, subscribe to YouTube, share it with your friends, put some comments. No pictures, but hey, right? Jenny did not know I was going to say that. That's what happens when we go live. So today is all about, I say the perineum, Jenny. What do you say?
Now I forget every time you say it, but I like the way you say it. Healing the perineum. I say perineum.
You say perineum, I say perineum.
You
The
say perineum.
perineum,
I say
right? And every time I was listening to a woman, a friend of mine, Kim, if you're ever watching, she is a pelvic floor therapist, and the what does she call it? Vagina mojo, I think it's called, or Kegel mojo. And I was like, yes, she says it. I say it the way she does. But I think it,
But I mean,
Pyrénées.
being a periné is just the nice way to say it. But I think because I don't know if people know that you have a few hats that you wear, but Sylvia is a big voice person, including singing and acting, and does, I don't know if I'm allowed to say all this, but like voiceovers and like commercials and stuff. So her speaking is spot on. I don't talk as good as she does.
You don't talk as good. You don't talk as
I
good,
don't
Jenny.
talk as good as Sylvia does.
So tell us, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, the perineum or the perineum,
Perineum.
healing it after birth. So
Yeah.
it's not something that most people love to talk about when we
No.
teach the prenatal classes. There's usually a little bit of cringing, a little bit of discomfort of the couple talking together. It's a scary thing to imagine tearing. And of course, for those of us who have been through it, we tend to, like, I find in myself, I tend to make jokes and be like a little bit more casual about it. It happened. I wasn't particularly traumatizing in
No.
many cases. So we'll talk about different degrees of tearing, how they can be different ways we can potentially prevent or at least minimize the tearing. And then we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to heal after giving birth. There's a number of things we'll suggest and recommend that you do after giving birth.
Yeah, and even how you can prepare ahead of time. Like, can you prepare? We get lots of different questions. Because I think if we were talking about penises and tearing of the penis and not the vagina, like, we'd have no more humans on Earth, Jenny. That's my view this morning. It'd be downfall of humanity.
Could not push a watermelon out of there. They couldn't do it.
No, but we can. That's our superpower.
We can and we do.
Exactly. I was trying to remember, talking about our past stories, about my births. I have 3 kids. I remember the afterbirth and what happened, not the afterbirth, but the tearing and the stitching after my son Tristan. And I remember that feeling very uncomfortable, just very uncomfortable. It's like you're very tender down there, especially if you don't have an epidural. And I remember that after birth being particularly, I remembered that more than I did my actual labor and pushing, which was really funny after, like, years, because I guess you'd get out of that birth bubble that you're in when they're at that point in labor. So I remember that with my girls, who were a pound more than a pound. They were like 8 pounds each, 8-1 and 8-2. I do not recall tearing. So that's a good thing, maybe. It wasn't that bad. Like, if I did, I got maybe 1 stitch. And one of them I didn't tear at all. So I know I felt very lucky. I felt very lucky. That's not always the
I'm
case.
wondering if I don't know if I'm cutting you off.
No, go ahead.
I'm wondering if it is a trend or if we know kind of numbers and stats, because I can definitely relate. My first birth my first birth, I did have an epidural, and we do know that that often the tearing happens when we've been pushing for an extended period of time, and often we're pushing for an extended period of time when we've had the epidural. So there is that link. When I had my first kid in the hospital, I did have an epidural, and I did have two secondary tearing. I, however, didn't push for very long. I remember this nurse said, "Nobody pushes for 3 hours with me." And she put her fingers in and she was like, "Can you feel this?" And I was like, "Yes." She was like, "This is where you have to push." And then I got the coaching, and then I held my breath. And so, yeah, anyway, we'll come back to the what not to do. But I held my breath anyway. So I did have secondary tearing, which got stitched up. And actually, one of the uncomfortable things for me was then going to my 6-week checkup, and I guess whatever had happened with the stitches, it was fine, but there was a little like skin tag, and the doctor who I didn't get along with, I'm sure people know by this point if they've been watching the show, I really didn't get along with this woman. She's like, "Oh, I'm just going to cauterize you," and like my legs flew out of the stir. Cauterize when you're there, you know. There was no cauterization that day. Everything
No, because
ended
you
up
kicked her in
fine.
the face, I think. You kicked her
Pretty
in the
much.
face.
That was the end of her. I should have, man. I should have. And for anyway, and then the second time around, I remember was at home, and the midwife had said like the tearing was so minimal. She's like, "Okay, I can give you a stitch, or you can just sit like a princess for the next while. What would you like to do?" So I was like, "Cool, I'll just
Princess
keep
Jenny.
my legs crossed." And yeah. So just to say that in my so I get distracted. There's a window here. In my in my experience, like yours, Sylvia, second time baby, there was not. So
Not so much.
I'm
Well,
assuming, I mean, it makes sense. Your body's been through it. I just wonder if I would love if anybody has, not that anybody's going to want to type out. It's just the two of us. We're going to talk about our perineums today, Sylvia. But if anybody does want to share in the comments if they have had similar experiences as Sylvia and I with subsequent kids, not. I mean, it makes logical sense. But I'm just curious.
It really does, because the first birth, you're just opening up for the first time. Everything is quite much tighter in that area. And then the second time, birthing an 8-pound baby in 15 minutes. Actually, my second one was 5 minutes, and she flew right out, and there was no tearing, right? So, but first babies do take a long time, right? And we're looking for an average of an hour and a half of pushing approximately. So about 30 to 90 minutes approximately. In our clientele, in our classes, we do talk about tearing because it's a subject that people want to know more about. But I would say many of our clients don't tear. Some do tear a little bit. And I think the majority is about a 2nd-degree tear. We're going to talk about what those degrees are. And then very few, like I can count on a hand, who had, larger problems.
Yeah, so it's nothing to be afraid of. Again, like we talk about, like, oh, no big deal, but it really is nothing to be scared of. It's part of natural progression, and usually it heals quite nicely with minimal effort. The horror stories you hear are nothing but horror stories, and
like in everything regarding birth, right? And people share their traumatic stories more than they share about, hey, I didn't tear, right? So when we talk about tearing, what does that mean? There are 4 degrees of tearing. First degree is really a small, like Jenny, sitting like a princess. There was they could have done 1 stitch. It's often abrasions on the outer lips. Second degree is more deeper inside the vagina, which is very normal. If I take my baby here, we've got a head coming in our, through the birth canal, and the tissues are quite fragile, and sometimes you have a little Superman baby with the head that that hand goes up, and their long nails, and it's just very normal for some of the tissues to tear. That would be 2nd degree, so inside the vagina. 3rd degree, you have your perineum and your rectum, and 3rd degree starts to go towards the rectum, not fully. Fully would be a 4th. So I do see less 3rds and 4ths. Thank heavens, right? But that's, those are the degrees of tearing.
And sometimes the bigger tearing too is happening if you mentioned if baby's coming out like this. So then baby's coming out, however baby's coming out, and then we need to use forceps or vacuum. and that's when the tearing is more important. Not important. I mean, like more pronounced than.
Yeah, or an episiotomy, right? When we see instruments like that, we often see, or not often, but sometimes we would see the forceps or the vacuum to help, or excuse me, an episiotomy with those instruments. Yes. Yeah. Again, not a pleasant topic of conversation, but we got that out of the way. Should we expect to tear? I say no. I mean, we don't, like, a lot of women don't tear. It really depends on the birth, the size of the baby, the position of the baby, what position you're pushing in. There are lots of things, right? I think we can't control them all. We do our best. But yeah, we don't control all of it. What can we do, Jenny? What did you do anything to prepare your perineum before birth?
I didn't personally. I now know years later that there are things I could possibly have done that may have made a difference. So I know you know them, Sylvia, but I'll mention them for everybody who's watching. So the first thing I think of is the perineal massage. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. So it's a massage of the périnée. It's such a nice word in French. And I often tell people that it's not, so you can get your partner to do it. It's not sexy time. You know, you use oil and fine and you're lubing up the area, but it's actually quite uncomfortable because you're stretching. So you can have your partner do it. It's easier usually to have somebody do it just because it's just more difficult to do on your own. There are, however, benefits to doing on your own that might be less about stretching the perineum, stretching the tissues, but more about just getting in general contact with that area, because we're not necessarily often in contact. We don't often know necessarily where we need to be pushing. So that's another bonus to doing the perineal massage if you do choose to do it yourself. And pelvic floor physios do it. And I was often sending my students or clients to the pelvic floor physio, like, if you're going to the pelvic floor physio anyway, can you get it done there? And it's something they do often. However, the other night I was in this training and I was talking to a pelvic floor physio in Ottawa called Lisa Flanders, who I've taken courses with before, and she's
Yes.
so she's so knowledgeable. And she didn't say I don't waste my time doing them, but I felt kind of that sense of, she felt there was a more possibly effective, simple way for women to do something similar to themselves, which is the release, the perineal release, I think she called it. And she suggested sitting on a tennis ball or a tune-up ball right on the perineum, and you can be there on your own and do it. And she seemed to think that that was very, very effective. So I think with a lot of these things, there's not necessarily the studies to back up and say exactly like, oh yes, if you do X amount of perineal massages before you give birth, you will not tear. We don't have that kind of information, but anecdotally, the people who do it seem to really, really think that it's a wonderful thing. So if people ask me if I recommend it, I kind of have now the attitude of like, well, why wouldn't you give it a shot? I think if it was me now, after having that conversation with Lisa. Actually, now what's going to happen is all the women in my prenatal yoga classes will be sitting on tennis balls. From what I understood from her, I think it can be a really, really great idea.
There'll be a rise in the sales of tennis balls.
It's it, exactly.
I've had discussions with other doulas about, and perhaps in my training as well, there are camps, like, there's always the circumcision versus no circumcision, bottle versus breast, cloth versus, throwaways. And there is, perineal massage and don't do perineal massage. I think the yes camp, you just talked about the yes camp and all the reasons they say to go for it. The no camp believes that that the body will lubricate itself, that we don't really need to be stretching that area, and that the burn that we're feeling when we're stretching and holding these stretches are the tissues actually tearing. And what happens when we tear is that there's a scar that forms. So if we're doing that every night, it's scarring, 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 so that actually when you go to birth, you don't see it like a huge scar on yourself. You wouldn't visually see it, but that you could actually tear more. So there are two sides. I do suggest, as doulas do, to go and do your research, right? And to see
with this, and I don't know what you come up as conclusive evidence with this. I know, like, again, just having finished my hypnobirthing training recently, it's the perineal massage is a big enough part of hypnobirthing, and I'm quite sold on that now.
Well, another tool that I don't know, do you know the Epino?
I know the Epino. I have opinions on it, and
I had one client who used the Epino. For those watching, if you know what the Epino is, let us know. Put a yes in the comments if anything is resonating with you. If you've done perineal massage, let us know. But the Epino is a machine that you pump, and it gets larger and larger and larger, right? So 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 4, all the way to 10. And over time, you insert this and inflate it, depending where you are in the sequence, so that it gets your perineum used to stretching at a certain point. And I had a client use it once, and she did a vaginal exam on herself in birth, and she goes, "Oh, I'm about 7 centimeters." And I'm like, "Oh, really? How do you know?" She goes, "Oh, it's just the same feeling that I had at my epino when my epino was at 7." And she got an exam, and she was 7 centimeters, to the amazement of all the staff. So she really liked that. I haven't had any other clients use it.
It's interesting for me, I think, and it was again something that was echoed when I was talking with Lisa. She brought it up. It's an expense, and like there's these things like for me, we'll talk to you in a moment about sitz baths, and I always laugh. You use these things are kind of a not one-time use, but one person use. Like you buy your Epino and you're not really passing it along to your best friend. It's like it's kind of. So and I'm not a huge necessarily gear person. Again, I didn't have any experience with it, so I would just rather buy the tennis ball and sit on it, I think, at this point, and or try
to know that it exists,
and to know that it's an option. And again, many of the people who have used it, like your client, are super into it. So if you're, I feel like any of that stuff, if you're drawn toward it, check out.
Yeah, and in getting getting prepared for birth, when you're doing your reading or taking your classes, we'll talk a lot about pushing if you assist our classes, and the better positions, I guess, or the positions I like our clients to start off with. Not being on your back for 2 hours to push in the same position, right? That can cause extra tearing and harm to the vagina for certain women. Again, not everybody, right? So learning about physiological pushing, trying different positions. I call them the alternative hospital positions if you're birthing in a hospital, like on the side, on hands and knees, and trying these out before you get on your back. Because often in the hospital, once you're on your back, depending on the hospital, sometimes they won't like moving around, right? Because they've already prepped everything, and it's hard to get back into more mobile positions.
The nurses will help too with almond oil. So the nurses will, before baby's born, the nurses are going to lose. It's usually almond oil, right?
Yeah. Or just gel.
And or a cloth. I find that can be really helpful. Again, like if you've had the epidural, I told you, like I said, that the nurse was like, she put her fingers, say, "Can you feel this?" And I could, but they'll also press a cloth.
Warm.
So you can have a pushback, a place to push back and understand what's happening, and that can be helpful to prevent the tearing too.
Yeah, and it's a nice warm cloth they use. They put it in warm water, and it just kind of helps soften the tissues. Yeah, that's good. How we were questioning this. You had asked me about cesarean birth. Do we need to heal the perineum after cesarean birth? I think there is partly yes. And also it really depends how far along in your labor. If you had a planned cesarean, perhaps less. But if you did labor along, say you labored along till 10 and you started pushing and then needed a cesarean, well then, your perineum definitely went through a lot of, it might be swollen. You might have torn a little bit if you had started the pushing process. So it really just depends, I think, on a personal basis. But yes, perineums always need tender, loving care.
Oh, there's definitely a whole process of healing cesarean scars that I think is a whole other.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So what are your favorites? I know you, as our postpartum doula at Rock the Cradle, you deal a lot with helping people heal. What are your favorite tools? What do you do?
Thank you for asking. Thank you. Yeah, not that long ago, before COVID, when I was going over to a client's house, and when I'm coming, I'm usually like, "Oh, what do you need me to pick up?" And I remember going into, so it was a sitz bath. She hadn't bought a sitz bath, and we definitely recommend. I guess at Rock the Cradle, I'm assuming you're recommending the same thing. To have a sitz bath, it's usually pink. I've seen gray ones, but it's
green.
Pink. You've seen green?
I have a green one.
Ooh, you kept it? Because you can't. I was going to give mine to Renaissance, and I was like, well,
Oh, I've kept it. I've used it for all three kids, and I suffered, I'll tell you, some hemorrhoids after birth. I won't tell everybody.
So you're hanging on
As
to
I
it in
get,
case you have more hemorrhoids? Is that
well,
the
now, no, now it's in the box where we teach our prenatal
oh,
classes. So
shoot. I
I
pick it up a
bring it
lot.
out and show,
I
because
hope that you've washed it.
people have never, yes, it has been washed many times, but people don't know what that looks like. And you say, oh, get it, it's in the geriatric section, but they've never actually seen one. So,
Yeah, it's cool. Well, we'll try to describe it, but yes, it's
mhm.
nice to have. It's like a bowl that you put on top of the toilet, so that you can fill it up with a number of different things. Anyway, so I was, I'll talk about that in a second, but I picked up a sitz bath from the Jean
Oh,
Coutu, and
good.
I had it on the metro, and I felt like suddenly like very self-conscious because like I hadn't just had the baby, and I had this thing, and I didn't have hemorrhoids, and anyway, I brought her that. So it's nice if people already have that kind of stuff, but we
Mhm.
can always pick it up if we need to. So yeah, I'll get like a little toolkit of what we could have. So you have your sitz bath. You have a peri bottle too, because you're not going to want to wipe after you've given birth. You want to use always water to just wash the area, warm water. And or in your peri bottle, you can put in a solution similar to what you would put in your sitz bath. And there's a lot of different things. In the sitz bath, you could bare bones put Epsom salt and warm water, and that would be really, really nice. We say to try to do it 10 times, 10 times to do it 10 minutes, 3 times a day. Nobody, I don't know in your experience, Sylvia, nobody seems to find that time. Or sometimes
I
you're
know.
nursing while sitting on the sitz bath. Some people don't love it. I personally loved it. It was this moment where I felt like it was actually, taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes out for myself. So
Mm.
you can have your Epsom salt and your warm water and or witch hazel. We love witch hazel. When I smell witch hazel, I just think of postpartum, and oh, it's such a nice clean. So you can get this at the pharmacy as well.
Mhm.
You can get Epsom salt. All those things come from the pharmacy. Also from the pharmacy, you can get Tux pads or the off-brand. This is all again in the hemorrhoid section. There should be a birth section. They're round pads that are mostly based in witch hazel that you then put in your pad against the perineum to heal, which is really nice to hang out and sit there. So again, that's drugstore stuff. You can also make your own compresses, and I used to, second birth, I made my own, again, witch hazel. And then if anybody is watching this and wants the recipe, please email whatever email address, mine or Sylvia's, you can find, and we'll send you a recipe. So it's aloe, like pure aloe vera, plus the witch hazel, plus some different essential oils that you can add. And then you put it on gauze so that you can have a more square pad, which I really thought was more appropriate than the round ones. I just liked having
Mhm.
and then some people soak their pads in witch hazel. And then you'll let me know if I forget anything. I'm just trying to off the top of my head. I love bringing people, if they don't already have a kind of tea that you can make, so different herbs that are healing for the perineum. There are companies that sell it. My favorite one to buy, and actually maybe the only one that I've seen to buy, is the Earth Mama Angel Baby, and they sell these tea bags. It's not tea to
Yeah.
drink, but you prepare your tea. It smells so good, eh? Prepare your tea. So I'll go into people's homes usually and make
Brew
that for them. Big mason jar, and then you use the tea from that mason jar in your sitz bath and or in
it.
your peri bottle.
It's
And
so like cooling and soothing. It's yeah. I looked once after my birth, Jenny. I don't know if you ever looked at your perineum after birth, and I looked once and then never again. I just
no, I
said,
was
no,
too scared.
I don't need to look at it
I was too
afterwards.
scared
Yeah.
actually because like I said, we're joking about it now. We make light of it 1, 2 times after it happened.
No,
Like,
but
no big deal. It heals. But when it's your first time, it's like, it's
oh,
just kind of terrifying, right? You've
it
not
was
done it before.
bruised. I'd never seen my vagina so bruised before, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just looked once, and yeah. What else? What else do we have? Did you talk padsicles? Is that something you
The
teach?
frozen,
The frozen
I
one?
do sometimes. Yeah, you can just simply freeze your maxi pads, or I say some like the little baby face cloths are nice. You can freeze
Mm.
those as well. Anything cool feels really, really great. So those, if you make your own Tux pads or you buy them, you can throw them in the fridge. And it sounds crazy. Honey, I like whatever I'm gonna say, like smear honey, but it is antibacterial. It's sometimes recommended too. If you want like more natural kind of stuff. There are like more kind of numbing creams and stuff that I've seen women use that I didn't personally have experience with. I just have seen recently in people's homes. I'm not exactly sure what the ingredients are, but that kind of stuff can help if there's a lot of pain accompanying,
Mm.
which there usually is. If it's not exactly the pelvic floor, tailbone, like you're sore for
Mhm.
a while after giving birth.
Oh, you
These
are.
are.
And it's not necessarily with going with the degrees of tearing, right? Just don't think that you might tear minimally and be 3 weeks hard of like walking is difficult, right? Or the swelling might be really bad. So it's not a correlation. I mean, there is a slight correlation, but just don't. One of my clients, she said, Sylvia, I wish I had known. Like I wasn't ready for not being mobile for 3 weeks. It really, really affected her.
And
Uh,
it is a mental thing. I was just saying to our
mm,
class last night, I taught the Rock the Cradle postpartum half, and just reiterating, the more that you surrender the fact that you are going to
mhm,
be, just surrender to it. Don't fight it.
mhm.
You're now nursing. You're now getting the hang of nursing. You don't want to walk up flights of stairs because of the perineum, because of just saving your energy. So embrace it. Know that it's a period of time, and you're gonna be fine after. It's not forever. It's just for
It's
now.
not like so many things, right? Definitely. How you had mentioned how long do we treat this? I do say 3 times a day, 10 minutes if you can. My clients who do that after birth have a quicker recovery.
Mhm.
Sometimes they call me up and say, Sylvia, it's tight down there. It's sore. And I said, well, have you been doing the baths, the sit baths? And they, no, I haven't been. You know how it is with a baby. I said, well, try them. And then they do it for a few days. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a difference. And then,
It,
about a week to 10 days, I would say.
Even once a day, even if you can do it
Even
once
once,
a day,
even
just do your
once.
best. And if one day you do it 3 times and one day you do it once,
It's
at
fine.
least you're doing it.
And
Yeah.
in between using cold compresses or the warms, sitz baths are easier because it takes 10 seconds to fill up rather than a full bathtub. Like people say, can I just use the full
Yes.
bathtub? But by the time you run your full bath, wash the bath, run the bath, your baby is crying, you're breastfeeding for an hour, then the water is cold. You have to unplug the water. Then it takes time to get the water out of the
And
bath.
it's
And then
stuff
it
we talk
just,
about this in pregnancy, and
mm,
people just look at you like, come on, it's like, if you're not in the postpartum period, it's very hard to understand all the stuff that Sylvia is talking
yeah,
about. It's just these little things that when you have not yet have a child, you just can't understand
not yet,
until you
but
go
you
through when
will.
you're in it. Yeah, and the partners too. Like the partners look at you like, yeah, right, I'm not going to have time to cook. And then I was saying to the class last night, there was this particular chef in the group in one of our classes one time, and he's like, no, man, it's fine. Like I'm quick. He was determined to cook, and I'm not an I told you so person. I would never, and he wrote me an email, and he was like, Jenny, I just wanted to tell you, I didn't have time to cook.
Exactly, right? Oh gosh. So there you go. Oh gosh, the time always goes by so fast. So, if we can final takeaways, how you can learn from the pushing positions that you feel comfortable in. I think that is something that you can prepare. Refusing episiotomy if not necessary. Some people think they can't refuse it, but you can talk to your doctor, of course. Again, if it's not necessary. In a medical emergency, you're not going to be saying no, but prepare
Oh,
your
and then
products.
can I back up on that? It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
because we know that it's easier to heal a torn
Mm,
perineum than a cut perineum.
yes.
So now it used to be a little bit more systematic, that they were cutting everybody to make more space for baby, and then we realized that it's easier to heal the tear than the cut.
Yes, definitely. Prepare your products before having your baby, right? Because after your baby is home and then you're sore and everything, it's a little bit. So your padsicles, your tea bags, sitz baths, sprays, and take the time to heal. I think Jenny mentioned that before. Take that time. What else do you have? You're learning about your baby. So I always say again, if you watch this show, get naked, all of you, and lay down in bed and just learn about each other and settle in as new parents
Mm,
and heal your perineum because your
perineum. It's good.
perineum,
Per,
perineum,
perineum.
perineum,
Perineum.
perineum. There we go. Say
Perennium.
that
I don't
again.
know, man.
Perineum, perineum. Well, hey, if you are expecting and are thinking about having a postpartum doula to help you with all this, you give us a call. Jenny is taking clients. Yes, even at this point in time, we
Yes, I'm
are
back in people's homes. I'm so
we're
happy to see real humans. It's
for those who would
beautiful.
like the help. If you are looking for a birth doula, the hospitals are opening up. So give us a call here. Here's the website here, rockthecradle.ca. Jenny is also teaching prenatal and postnatal yoga, and we'll talk about more of these things in her classes. So it's always a great thing to come together, and also as a group of women to share after birth too. Like, oh yeah, this happened to me. I mean, we didn't even get into all of the pelvic floor stuff and incontinence, right? Because that's a whole other topic. But there will be moments like that. So thank you, thank you so much, everybody. Please give us a like. The more likes, the more comments, the better it shows up
It's
in
funny, it'll be
our.
neat to see who comments, like we were talking often in yoga classes when we're teaching about this kind of stuff, or even the pelvic floor exercises. Like, okay, does anybody have questions? If you're asking about a question about, something
Oh yeah,
something
yeah,
mechanical, lots
of
of
course.
questions, but it's like, I would anyway.
No,
Anyway, I don't know how many people are going to comment.
today
We might have
comments, we
crickets.
did not have any. We had no comments today, but I get it. Who
You
wants
said enough.
to
You said
talk
enough.
about their vaginas on air? Haha, I do.
We did it.
We
We did
did
it.
it. Thank you so much. We'll be here next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. And if you have a subject you'd like us to chat about, please let us know. It will be our pleasure. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.